So this is what I have kind of determined as acceptable return in a Randle trade. And I'm talking strictly about like the salaries itself and the terms of what comes back. So the first option is little to no salary in return. If the Knicks basically dumped Julius Randle as part of a 2-team or a 3-team or however many team deal you want, where the Knicks are sending Julius Randle's salary out and getting little to nothing in return. Knicks could go with two approaches. Number one, they could try to operate as a below the cap team, renounce the traded player exception that they would generate by dumping Julius Randle and create cap space, or they could stay above the salary cap or, go as an above the cap team, keep the traded player exception, and then work on a sign and trade or trade a player into that traded player exception. Either way, it's like that's acceptable, right? If the Knicks want to kind of navigate in that manner, that's something that works perfectly.
This is the Dallas is not playing nicely in the sandbox, even though Jalen Brunson has made his feelings known that he wants to come to the Knicks scenario.
Yes, and more on that later.
Okay.
But yes. Then there's the idea of matching non-expiring salary, right? So it's a contract that doesn't expire in 2023. The Knicks could still operate as an above the cap team in 2022. Then it's the matching expiring salary, but it's for a player that's actually good. So like, I don't know, a Jeremy Grant type player. For example, if the Knicks wanted to trade for Jeremy Grant and they used Julius Randle as outgoing, Jeremy Grant is an unrestricted free agent in 2023, but the Knicks could always basically take Jeremy Grant's salary and extend him for whatever contract they wanted. It could be
for a max contract, the max he gets signed for.
Right. But it's right. And to clarify, it's not a max contract. Yeah. It's like a Julius max contract of what they can do. So that's financially speaking, contract speaking, that's what would be acceptable. What would be unacceptable in my mind is number one, bad expiring salary. So like, unless the front office believes that they can flip an expiring contract that they don't want to extend for a player who doesn't have expiring salary, that's a good way to go about it. But it has to then be a two-step process. It's a little bit more challenging. It's more pressure on the Knicks to get a deal done. Then there's a player who isn't starting caliber. So like, we can talk about all of Julius Randle's flaws. At the end of the day, he's a starting player. He deserves to be a starter. Yes, he's high usage. He's inefficient, not great around the rim. All these things we could throw out there. He's a starter. And if you're the Knicks, you should be expecting a starter in return, or at least someone who's starting caliber. Yes,
just an asterisk to that, unless they got some kind of draft equity of significance with the non-starting caliber player.
Yes, but also I don't think that happens so frequently where it's like that's a very plausible premise. It could happen.
I know. I agree. I agree with you. We did this last week a little bit. I agree with you. I wanted, because there are people out there who are like, if you could get that deal, get that deal. I'm not saying, we're not saying we don't like that deal in theory. It's just the likelihood of it being out there is probably not very high.
Right. And then the player who will block Obi Toppin. Again, I believe if you're trading Julius Randle, you should start Obi Toppin, which is why using Jeremy Grant as an example isn't necessarily the best bet, because you'd have to probably shift RJ Barrett to the 2. And then what are you doing with Evan Fournier? And how does the fit with Grant and RJ and Obi work? And all sorts of things. So like from a contractual standpoint, it makes sense with Jeremy Grant. But then maybe from a positional standpoint, it's just a lot more cluttered, especially now that you have Cam Reddish.
This is like the Harrison Barnes thing too, which is like Julius is a straight 4. Harrison's more of a 3-4, but like realistically, are they going to use him in that capacity? But then again, if we're talking about whatever, we don't have to get into Harrison Barnes too much, but like there are gray areas here. The only other thing I just, again, to put a point on it for anybody is like, well, why wouldn't we want bad expiring salary? This is probably, again, if you missed last week's episode, as Jeremy pointed out, the way the Knicks are set up cap wise for the foreseeable future, there's no plan here to operate as a team that is under the salary cap, or at least with any significance. So
certainly not moving forward, and ideally not this year. But It's funny you mentioned that, John, because of course I'm going to mention it. I'm going to bring it up as well. So here's an example, right? Let's say the Knicks decided to go off of a cliff and they did Randle and Nerlens Noel and Kemba Walker and got Russell Westbrook back. I'm not endorsing this. I'm just saying as a pure example for what happens, right? Like you could then have something like this, where sure, you have Russell Westbrook's contract coming off the books. It's a $49 million cap hold. And that seems like, hey, we've got all this money to spend. Well, you also might want to exercise the team options for Alec Burks and Derrick Rose. And then you've got Cam Reddish's cap hold still on the books and RJ Barrett's cap hold. And this isn't even accounting for the 2 first-round picks that the Knicks are supposed to have. And this is also saying, Mitchell Robinson, I just threw out a random number. I said $12.5 million. Don't read into it. It's just really just for math. But you're over the salary cap. You don't even have money to work with. And now you're only 3 salaries that you have at your disposal, assuming they don't get traded between then: Evan Fournier, Derrick Rose, Alec Burks. So it's not great. But what if the Knicks didn't go about this way? And in what I mean by that is, what if they still did the same trade, got Russell Westbrook or that type of player, and then they just declined Derrick Rose and Alec Burks, and then they could open up cap space that way? They could do it. It's definitely possible. We're looking at $30 million practically without, again, considering the first round picks that are there. Few things. Number one, you're really not going to have many unrestricted free agent stars likely on the market. I fully expect Nikola Jokic to sign a Supermax and stay in Denver.
Why are you being kind? There's nobody that's going to be on the market in 2023.
Right. But I'm just
but this notion that there are these stars, like we dance
that's why
around.
I'm trying to dispel it. Yeah.
We dance around this issue. Yeah. Free agency is gone. It's gone. It went bye-bye.
It's dormant. Yes.
It doesn't exist in the NBA anymore.
Well,
like these things, it does, but it not in the sense that it used to exist, right, where you're saving up your cap space and you're making a big run at player X, player Y. It doesn't happen.
Right. And we can just remove Bradley Beal from the situation. And then if you're talking about, Zion Williamson's a restricted free agent. Okay. Well, how many times does Zion Williamson or a restricted free agent star just walk to another team for cap space, especially one that's deserving of however much they will command? And then the other team's like, cool, we'll just let you go. It doesn't happen. And if that player figures out a way to somehow force himself elsewhere, well, then you're going to want to probably send matching salary back too. And if you have lost it by trying to create cap space, it doesn't help you. Because as you can see right now, it's like RJ Barrett, I gave him less than the cap hold, and same thing with Cam Reddish. Even if you did that, you're still running into the issue. Like, we have no choice but to trade Evan Fournier and probably Obi Toppin and then some other things. Although Zion's a weird situation because then our best friend base year compensation comes into play. Bottom line here is it's just like, it doesn't make sense to go as an under the cap team in 2023. It makes more sense this year, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense to do it, in my opinion. You know who's going to be the best if he doesn't extend, which I think he probably will extend? I was going to say the best free agent on the market realistically that's actually going to hit the market in 2023 might be the guy who's the best free agent on the market 2 years ago, Fred VanVleet. Maybe he gets to the unrestricted market. After him, you're going to be looking at, again, realistically, after these extensions get signed, like D'Angelo Russell. Maybe D'Angelo Russell hits unrestricted for a variety of reasons. Although I wouldn't even bet on that. I would bet on him probably signing. The point is, like, you're saving up your money for nothing. That's all. That's a great way of putting it. Yes. Save it money for nothing.